Hello, my name is Dr. Melanie Badali, and I'm a registered psychologist in British Columbia. I enjoy helping people gain deeper self-understanding and learning new ways to cope with stress, solve problems, and achieve meaningful goals in their lives. In my practice at the North Shore Stress and Anxiety Clinic, I work with people who are dealing with anxiety, self-esteem problems, depression, sleep problems, and having trouble with life transitions such as becoming a new parent or losing a loved one. I use cognitive behavior therapy, which is an effective, scientifically supported treatment for anxiety and depression, among other things. I believe everybody should have access to treatments that work. As such, I'm also a volunteer. I'm on the board of directors at AnxietyBC, a nonprofit organization that helps raise awareness, promote education, and provide access to evidence-based resources for people with anxiety. I really enjoy helping people as they navigate life's journeys. As we go along, there's inevitably bumps along the way, and I'm happy to help people learn new things and navigate what can sometimes be troubled waters a little bit more easily. What is CBT? CBT stands for Cognitive Behavior Therapy. Cognitive means to do with thinking, our thought processes, how we interpret things and perceive the world around us, how we process information. Behavior has to do with our actions, what we do, and therapy is a treatment that helps people feel better and get stronger. In cognitive behavior therapy, there are two basic ideas. One is that our cognitions or our thoughts can influence our behaviors, what we do, and how we feel, or our emotions. The other is that our behaviors, or what we do, can influence, you guessed it, our thoughts, and how we feel. And so cognitive behavior therapy is kind of a really cool way of looking at, are there any thoughts or behaviors that are getting in your way? Are they getting in the way of you feeling the way you want to feel, doing the things you want to do, having the type of life you want? And if we can find some thoughts that are a little bit, maybe they're not quite grounded in reality, maybe they're a little bit overly negative, we can work with making those more productive. And the same goes with behaviors. Sometimes, in cognitive behavior therapy, it's not about any sort of kind of twisted thinking or sort of unproductive thinking. It's just that life has dealt you a really tough or rough hand at that time, and then it's more about calling that acceptance work, problem solving. If there's real problems to solve, how can we get you solve those problems? Or if there's something different, like a death of a loved one or a chronic illness, how can we get you coping with that as best as you can? The cognitive or thinking part of CBT is really interesting, and one of the ways that we tend to approach thinking in CBT is at three levels. So on the top level, or the most obvious level, we have conscious thought, and most of us have access to that. If you think of thoughts as words in your head, most of us can, sort of string together two words, though of course on a video like this I have trouble doing that. And so we're aware of kind of what we're thinking and how to translate that into thoughts. You're walking along, you think, oh, I want a cup of coffee, and then you go and you buy a cup of coffee. Underneath that, and this is where things get a little bit more interesting, is what we call automatic thoughts. And so these ones are ones that you can become aware of, but sometimes they're just more like this background noise, this like little chitter chatter voice in your head. You can be ordering a coffee, and you can also be thinking, oh, I have to go give a presentation. Oh, did she understand my name when I said that my name? Are they going to call somebody else for my coffee? Is somebody going to get my coffee? It's just that, that's often going on in your brain. And that's the layer of automatic thoughts. And then, underneath that, even deeper, we have core beliefs, or some people in CBT will call those schemas. So core beliefs, that's that deepest level. These are really kind kind of the essence of things. These are the rules that drive the automatic thoughts, that drive the conscious thinking, and that usually drive our behaviors in life. And so we come by these in many different ways, you know, from our parents, or the people who raise us, media, religious organizations that you might be a part of, friends. You know, we have all sorts of influences on these core beliefs, and they're really kind of like the rules that we live by. And sometimes there can be core beliefs that don't even agree with each other, and so I really enjoy digging around there to see, are there any rules that you have that are kind of getting in the way of your current life, ones that maybe you got years ago and that no longer are really working for you, or ones you didn't even realize you have. Because what we know is that sometimes when we're under periods of extreme stress, it can release some more negative core beliefs about ourselves that weren't even a problem before. As I mentioned before, there's all sorts of thinking that's going on in the brain, lots of thoughts. You know, some people, you know, up to 14,000 thoughts per day. Some of us, like me, have really busy brains and thoughts are always going on. You know, lots of times these can be productive, and we can, you know, sort of practice things in our head and solve problems, and it can be really useful. Other times it can kind of go dark. You know, the thoughts start getting heavy, and they can be overly negative, and they can keep us from doing things that would actually be good for us. And so everybody goes through periods of time where they have negative thoughts. You know, it's not unusual to have a thought, ugly, oh, something looks, you know, ridiculous, or I'm going to bomb at that test, you know, these types of things. These are normal. But when you get into these patterns of thinking where they're negative and they become kind of like a rut or a trap that it's hard to get out of, then it's time to either seek professional help or you know, utilize some self-help resources that can help you learn some techniques to, one, identify some thoughts that might be unproductive for you, and two, how do you, you know, learn to climb out of those. There are a number of common thinking traps. You can find them on the AnxietyBC.com website, but here are a few that you can be thinking about now. So in this age of social media, I think everybody's aware of filters. You know, you can apply filters to make yourself look, you know, like you have a smoother complexion, or like you're barfing rainbows, or you look like a dog. I mean, some of them are really cool and fun. But the ones we're talking about are really negative ones. These ones are ones where maybe you only focus on your negative qualities, or if you did a presentation, you're only noticing, you know, the one negative comment, not the, you know, 50, hey, that was a great presentation, you know, that person that was smiling. You know, when I used to teach introductory psychology, there was always, you know, some really engaged students, and there was always some students who were bored. As much as I would try to engage everyone, inevitably there was, you know, there are going to be a few people who just aren't digging what you have to say. And so, you know, with a negative mental filter, it's like if you were a camera, you're like a zoom lens on the negatives, and that zoom lens kind of gets stuck, right? So cognitive behavior therapy will help you, like, you know, kind of bring it back, see the whole picture, focus on the positives, things like that. So that's just one example. You know, since we're on sort of the theme of cameras, black and white thinking, you know, or dichotomous thinking, and this is really like, you know, I'm perfect or I'm a failure, really looking at things more in extremes. And so the world really isn't all or nothing. You know, there's lots of shades of gray, and that's, you know, to me, that's the rich variation. And so really focusing on, yes, I made a mistake, but I can learn from that mistake, and I'm not a failure. So that's another one. You know, and that sort of leads into this kind of idea of overgeneralization. You know, with that all or nothing, there's the always or never. And if you're dealing with other people, you know, if you say you never take out the garbage, or, you know, something like that, you're probably going to get in a fight, right? But in your own brain, somehow it's like, yeah, you're never good at public speaking. You're not, and it's like, you know, your brain agrees with you. So that's a problem, because, you know, nobody tends to really be that bad. And if you are, then there's ways to kind of accept that and focus on some of the things that you're good at. So that brings me to another one, which is labeling. How do you label yourself? If you make a mistake or two, do you call yourself a failure? Do you call yourself a loser? It's really easy to do this. It's easy to kind of get in that habit of sliding there and labeling yourself. And sometimes even, positive labels can get you in trouble, because if you're expecting yourself to be overly perfect, which, sometimes you'll be like, oh yeah, perfect isn't so bad. It's really hard to live up to perfect. It doesn't really exist. So then your goal is up here, and even if you're excellent, you're here. What's the idea? You get 95 on a test. Oh, what about that, one question you got wrong, and it just sticks there, and you stew on it, and it bothers you. That kind of idea. Jumping to conclusions, right? This is an easy one. Something hasn't even happened yet, and maybe it's a party you're going to go to, and you think, oh, nobody's going to talk to me at the party. And then you get to the party, and you're like, oh, they're all thinking I just look foolish, that kind of thing. And so, these things can cause problems, and this is where the thoughts link to behaviors as well, because maybe you're then less likely to go to the party. Maybe you're at the party and you're less likely to talk to them, that kind of thing. And so, really the idea with looking at thinking traps is, are there any patterns of thinking that you do a lot that you can identify and then start to work with so they don't interfere with your life as much, you're doing more the things that you want to be doing, and two, that they're just not causing you as much distress. These thinking traps can really, do a number on emotions. They can have you feeling really depressed, really angry, if you think everybody's out to get you, this kind of stuff, really anxious, and the whole range of emotions, the way you think can really influence that. So there's all sorts of different thinking traps you can fall into. It's really helpful to kind of take a look at some different ones and say, oh, am I doing that? And then look up techniques to help you with them. So in cognitive behavioral therapy, we're not just all about, okay, well, let's identify the problems and then leave you to your own devices. The idea is, once you're identifying things that are causing you problems or emotional distress, what do you do about them? And so as the name implies, cognitive behavioral therapy, you're using thinking techniques and behavioral techniques to go. So behavioral techniques often involve experiments and testing your fears. So, if you have the idea that, hey, I'm never going to be able to pass Math 12, and you had decent grades in Math 11, and your instructor have told you, that you can pass, then, you can examine the evidence. There's a cognitive technique to sort of see, well, what's the evidence that I'm going to pass or fail? Okay, the evidence is I feel like I'm going to fail. And the evidence that you're going to pass is, well, I passed the last grade, and my previous instructor thinks I can do it, then you might want to then use the behavioral technique of taking that course, right? Same with asking someone on a date. Right? It's that combination of looking at thoughts that might be holding you back, asking yourself honestly, are these true? Like, is there really a chance that if I ask 100 people out, 100 people are going to say no, and then start doing that experiment, I think one of the helpful cognitive techniques that people can use is, what would I say to a friend? Or what would a loved one say to me? Or what would you say, so my clients who have kids, what would you say to your daughter? Or what would you say to your son? To sort of get you out of that negative thinking space and say, okay, if my friend had these qualities, if my friend had this experience, what would I tell them to do? What advice would I give them? Would I say, you're a loser, don't even bother? Or would you say, no, you have a lot to give, go for it. I'll be here for you. You'll be okay if you don't get it. So I think that's a good starter technique, is that, what would you tell somebody you care about? And then, also examining the evidence is a really good one too. Sometimes people like to pretend they're, lawyers on opposite, sides of the courtroom. Now, don't be the judge. You're just looking at what are the two different cases, right? And so I think often our core beliefs are like our boss beliefs. They're trying to be the judge, our automatic thoughts. They're trying to be the judge. And with cognitive behavior therapy, it's really about rational thinking, observing, gathering evidence, and then making a decision. Kind of if you were in business, it's your strategic plan. You act according to your strategic plan, not how you feel on any given day. So those are some cognitive behavioral techniques. Another one is facing your fears. If you're afraid of doing things, get out there. Now, this doesn't mean if you're afraid of spiders, you need to get in an elevator full of, and elevators, let's say, and get in an elevator full of spiders. No, this is a sort of a gradual exposure to things as you're building coping statements and things like that. So, identifying any things in your thinking that are keeping you back, kind of challenging those if they're a little bit off, and then using productive self-talk, telling yourself, you know what, I'm going to give this a try. If I can't do this, I can handle that, and, the surest way not to get what I want is to not even try, that kind of thing. I can do it, I'm really being compassionate towards yourself and paying attention to your self-talk. Now, sometimes, despite our best efforts and using all sorts of cognitive techniques and behavioral techniques to challenge that really, unproductive, negative, dark thinking that's holding us back, it won't go away. It sticks. It's really, really sticky. And there I would advise to use a more mindful or acceptance and commitment therapy kind of approach where you observe the thoughts come and you observe the thoughts go. You don't try and fight them. I think it's worth a try. Always try and fight them first, because if you can pull some negative thoughts out by the roots and reduce the likelihood that they're coming and reduce the negative emotions, awesome. But it doesn't always work, and when it doesn't, try observing and not letting those thoughts boss you around. So I'm noticing I'm having a thought, then I'm a loser. It's different than saying I'm a loser. It's just creating a little bit of distance, a little bit of doubt. Imagine your thoughts, and usually there's lots of them, as leaves floating by on a stream. Okay, you're not controlling them, but they're not bossing you around either. As clouds on the sky, this kind of thing. This approach can be really helpful. I would say it's a cognitive approach. Other people would give it different labels, but the idea is it's a useful approach. So, for me, it's always about doing experiments. Try something new. Try a new technique and see if it works. And if it doesn't, back to the drawing board. Try something new. But I think it's important to remember, if you've been having this type of pattern of thinking for a long time, it's not going to just change overnight. It's going to take work. It's just like when you start exercising, you're not going to suddenly have a six-pack, right? You're going to take a lot of sit-ups and core work before you get that. Cognitive behavior therapy is the same way. You're going to have to do a lot of practice, and of course, I think it's worth it.